Hello friends, I am Chevy. Welcome to my shed. How are you today? How's life in your world? How's things where you are? Hope it's fantastic and wonderful. I've been working a good bit on the game recently, on specifically on player aids, graphic design, that sort of stuff, which is funny. So it's not funny, but I posted about it yesterday on my Twitter because I took what was a pretty clear and concise player aid. So I had made these little cards. These were the actions that you started with at the beginning of the game. And on the back side, it had a turn sequence and scoring summary. And so these are very simple little, hand this to a player, they go, these are the three things I can do. And you go, yep, those are the three things you can do. And they're off and running. And on top of that, or I should say in addition to that, I have this little extra kind of things that you can do sheet off on the side, and some of those things are also abilities. So they're abilities that you can do, but to do these you have to unlock them. And it's been kind of bothering me that this kind of becomes this cluttered mess because these top things are abilities and this bottom stuff is all scoring, and so it didn't feel right to have these all in the same place. And so I decided to move the unlockable abilities over to the player aid. I also decided to remove one of these three starting abilities and make one of these abilities unlockable because at the start of the game, one of these abilities is a little bit too good, and it comes down to a luck of the draw. Without explaining to you how the whole game works, luck of the draw meant that if you could pull this off on turn one, you got leapfrogged ahead of everybody else, and that just seemed really wrong. So I've moved it to an unlockable ability, and I started to put together this player aid that is now, this is a 2 sheets, so half of this is a player aid. Now it has the turn summary at the top, the scoring summaries at the bottom, the things that you have at the beginning of the game on the left, and the unlockables on the right. And so everybody has their own unlockable little thing. You put your little meeple there, and it lets people know that you have that ability, and that would remove it from this sheet. Anyway, the whole point of all of this is I was working on this, and I realized that, either A, I'm not the graphic designer I think I am, or B, my graphic design skills have severely gone down the drain since I stopped practicing. Since I was really doing it actively, I'm pretty proud of the products that I've made in the past, the graphic design and work that I've done in the past. Admittedly, on this particular project, I put a minimal effort. When I ordered the board and the cards to update the game to the new theme, I spent like an hour total reworking the graphic design. I was just like, I'm going with solid color backgrounds, solid color icons. I don't need to have shadows or any sort of fancy borders. I'm just going to make it as simple as possible. And what ended up happening out of that was I got this really clean look that I actually really enjoy. And so in trying to do this mess, I've tried to keep it clean and keep it easy to understand. And what I found is that's really not easy to do anymore. I just don't have an eye for it like I used to. I used to be able to look at things and understand like how I scan a document. Part of graphic design is understanding how humans, when presented with like a document like this or an advert or a rule book, how your eye takes this in and how you can do things to draw attention. So for instance, this white box in the middle with this really kind of jarringly unexplained information really draws your eye. When you look at this, that's the first thing your eye gets drawn to. The light color, the bigger icons, they're bigger than all the surrounding icons, and that's semi on purpose. It's so that you understand that those things you have to spend for. Like the stuff that's over here you don't get to do immediately. And then my eye, at least, I am able to once I see that and I go, okay, that's a thing, the gray stuff kind of fades, and that's intentional because, this bottom piece that's dark, you don't need to look at that until the end of the game, and so your eye kind of just doesn't pay attention to it. And the stuff that's got a gray background, kind of for some reason, I think it's because we're used to gray being kind of things being grayed out, your eye kind of glosses over that, and the next thing that I hope that draw your attention to is the blue area. This is stuff that you kind of either information or you start the game with, and you start scanning left to right and top to bottom. And that's my intention for this layout and this design. I also think that everything that I just said is kind of bullshit. Like, graphic design is there are hard and fast rules to good graphic design, but they're very few and far between. The vast majority of it is subjective. Some people like a lot of white space. Some people like a little bit of white space, and there could be arguments made for either in various situations. I think in this particular situation, unfortunately, there is no white space. I wish I had much more room to play with. I wish I could put this on an 8.5 by 11 and make that your player board, and I could. It seems excessive for a simple player board. So what I think I need to do is figure out a much, much better way to present this information. The other part of this is that these unlockables, this top one is discard 3 of a kind, and then you have to put a worker here, and then for the rest of the game you'll have this expand ability. That's, just something that you have to pay to unlock. Those mirror the unlockable scoring abilities. So there's a whole bunch of scoring in this game that you don't get unless you have paid to unlock it at some point during the game. You can choose to unlock it early, or if you choose to wait until later, it's going to get, prohibitively expensive to pay for it later. But you also might not care later on. And also, it will, whoever... the points that you earn go down, essentially. Especially for these bottom two. Being late to the game means that you're not going to score as many points. But the intention was that these things kind of mirror these things because they are unlockables, and trying to figure out a way to present that cleanly is very difficult. And for a prototype, it's fine. For me, doing a prototype, showing it to playtesters and saying, here's what's going on, and I can answer all of your questions without having to reference a rule book, I think it's fine. But for, if I was going to present this to, even to a publisher, I would be okay with this. It's fine. It scans well. And with my explanation, it could be very easy to understand. Would I publish a game with something like this, maybe with some gussied up graphics? No, it's a complete mess and it needs reworked. But it's really kind of, it struck me as odd that just taking a few years off from doing serious graphic design work really made my skill in that area diminish. I feel like I'm just kind of looking at it and not really understanding what my eye is seeing, and that hurts a little bit because I used to take a little bit of pride in my self-taught graphic design abilities. But the good news is, I feel really comfortable with the game right now. I'm really excited to playtest it with others. I've been playtesting it solo, and I think it flows really well. It's very snappy. Turns don't take very long because there's just a few actions, and then it snowballs a little bit once the game gets going. But I've turned it so that the draw phase is now at the end of your turn, so that you can plan your turn while everybody else is taking their turn. So hopefully that will speed things along a little bit. But we'll see, and when I get to playtesting. So that's all I have for you today. Just a little whine about my lack of skill. Thank you for being here as always. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, being amazing friends and wonderful people. I really appreciate you, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Today's word you should know to sound smart is gaysome. It's an adjective meaning playful and frolicsome. Nature is gamesome and good, but of mutable mood. No dreary repeater, now and again, she will be all things to all men. Ralph Waldo Emerson, American poet, essayist, and transcendentalist. I think the guy who wrote this book has something for Ralph Waldo Emerson. Gamesome, G-A-M-E-S-O-M-E. I probably should have left the little thing about Ralph Waldo for this section when I usually make some remark about the word.